Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Naruto was saved by KeyBlade after 4th Shinobi War. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Not wasting no more time, let's start the story.
With a weary sigh, Naruto resumed his journey along the slender path in front of him. For as long as he could see, everything around him was dark. The fact that he was all alone didn't help either. At the moment, Kurama was absent, though he could always feel his presence in the back of his mind. That was at least a little consolation because he could still feel the chakra he had taken from him. But his missing companions weren't. He didn't really care at the moment, and he didn't know that it had happened during his altercation with Tobi, Madara. Pools of darkness had suddenly started to appear out of nowhere, bringing the fight between them to a screeching halt. They initially believed it was Toba's fault, but they realized something was seriously amiss when they noticed he was equally perplexed as they were. It all became a blur after that. All he remembered was a bright light, small bug-like creatures, and the sensation of drowning. He was on the path he was currently taking when he woke up, holding the strangest-looking sword. The handle and guard were a solid black while the blade was a startling silver color with 4 sharp prongs at the tip. The two become one. If he stared at it long enough, it actually reminded him of a key. When he first found it, he wasn't entirely sure what to do with it, but he had a gut feeling that it would be wise to keep it. He had attempted to call his friends but received no answer. Therefore, walking and hoping to get somewhere was the only sensible course of action. The situation wasn't going well. He seemed to be going nowhere at all, regardless of how far he walked. To put it mildly, it was depressing. He wasn't one to give up, though. He had endured too much to allow a little walking to depress him. He made an effort to avoid thinking too much about what had transpired with everyone. He fervently hoped that they were doing well. He was still unsure of what it was and why he had it in his hand when he looked down at the blade, or at least what he believed to be a blade of some sort. It was very bright and powerful, and he could feel the power radiating from it. It was almost like when he used the chakra of Kurama. He pondered once more what he should do with it. He felt as though he had been walking for miles, but when he looked around again, he noticed that nothing had changed. Exasperated, he cried, "A little help would be nice." There was nobody around, so he had no idea to whom he was speaking. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something. The sword had begun to glow, and it pointed forward, nearly dragging him to the ground, and emitted a beam of light as though it had life of its own. As a kind of portal materialized in front of him, Naruto gaped. After glancing at the blade, he gave a loud whoop. He yelled, "Now that's what I'm talking about," and then, grinning broadly, leapt headfirst into the portal. He grunted, "Ugh," as he hit the hard ground with a resound. As he slowly got himself off the ground, he looked around. The massive, intimidating tower that towered over him would have been the first thing to catch his eye. It was surrealistically crooked and golden bronze in color. It appeared to be lacking many of the components that would typically support a building, yet it managed to remain intact. Its blue cone-shaped turret roofs featured designs of stars and the moon. As he got a better look, past the few trees, he could now see that he was only on a little patch of land that seemed to be floating in the middle of nowhere. He made the decision to enter the tower, hoping that someone inside could assist him. Pushing open the doors, he was met with the sight of a simple round room. A staircase that led to an odd green portal appeared to encircle it. As he ascended the stairs and entered the portal, he held the blade firmly. When he saw that there were even more stairs than before, he couldn't help but blink. With a shrug, he ran up the flight 3 at a time, then went into a rounded chamber with more patterns of stars and moons. He began to believe that whoever occupied this place had a strong affinity for those specific shapes. A tiny portal of darkness appeared in front of him as he was moving across the room, and then he stopped, revealing one of the bug-like creatures he had seen before going black. He looked around as more of them appeared, completely surrounding him. They lunged at him, and he flashed his teeth. Avoiding them was essentially child's play. Due to their lack of coordination, they ended up striking each other rather than him. "Kage Bushin no Jutsu," he yelled after driving the blade into the ground and inserting his hand into a well-known cross. At that moment, a terrible sensation gripped him. Everything seemed to have stopped altogether. After taking a trembling breath, he turned to face the world and saw that there were no clones in front of, behind, or beside him. He tied his hands into a Rasengan after examining them, but the sensation returned. It dawned on him then. He was unable to use his chakra. It seemed to be absent, as if he couldn't sense it flowing through him, and as a result, whenever he attempted to use jutsu, it seemed to stop altogether, producing nothing at all. He thought about all of this in a matter of seconds before the black creatures threw him to the ground. He tried to buck them off with a grunt, but they held him with an unexpectedly tight grip. Recalling the blade he had driven into the floor, he searched the room for something. When he extended his hand, he discovered that it was barely within reach. He started to feel like he was sinking into the earth at that point. The creatures were literally pulling him down into a pool of darkness when he turned to look behind him. He tightened his jaw. If he ended up back there, he'd be damned. He slowly moved away from the blade as he attempted to reach it once more. In a flash of light, the blade appeared in his hand, resting innocently, as if he had practically asked it to. He stared at it for a moment, then swung back, killing 3 of the creatures in one stroke, then leapt back and reoriented. After giving the remaining creatures a fierce look, he charged at them at full speed. He stabbed and slashed with a level of accuracy he had never before realized, and after a brief moment, they all vanished into thin air. He inhaled as he relaxed, but remained vigilant. The realization that he was currently unable to access his chakra was shocking and somewhat frightening. Fortunately, when he attempted to summon Kurama's chakra, he was encircled by a familiar flame. He glanced down at the blade in his hand and dismissed it for the moment. It appeared to be his only weapon at the time, but this thing had saved his life. He nodded to himself as he passed through the next doorway and encountered additional stairs. He wanted to cry. He reached the top of another set of stairs and entered what appeared to be some sort of study. It appeared to be the tower's largest room thus far. The courtyard he had been in moments before was visible through the large star and moon windows. A large wooden desk with a large chair behind it, and several shelves filled with numerous books. Something about a door off to the side intrigued him a little, but when a voice spoke to him, all of this was moot. The voice was deep and solemn. "Well, you certainly know how to make an entrance, young man," it said. A rather tall old man was standing close to the windows when he turned around. In addition to his deep blue robes, he wore a blue cone-shaped hat adorned with yellow stars and moons. His bushy eyebrows, long gray hair, and long gray beard, which parted down the middle, gave him a sense of strength and wisdom that, strangely, made him think of the Sandaime Hokage. If the hat didn't reveal it, he assumed this was who occupied the tower. "Hello, sir," he said slowly, not a little apprehensively. "My name is Naruto, and I was just wondering if you could help me." I may," he said slowly, as if he was thinking about a challenging question. He gestured for him to stop talking and shifted to the seat behind the desk. Before concluding that it wouldn't really matter that much, Naruto wasn't entirely sure how much he should tell him. He only made passing references to the war and provided little information about Konoha. He did, however, describe in detail what had transpired after that point, including walking down the pathway in complete darkness. After a long period of silence, the elderly man pulled a small book from his sleeve. "You have come to the right place if you want answers to your problems, or rather, you were led to the right place to deal with your problems," he stated. "My name is Yen Sid and I have many answers to the questions you seek. But first, it might be prudent to look through this book first." After merely raising an eyebrow, Naruto picked up the book and began to look through it. He didn't understand a lot of things in there. Something about the heart of all worlds, keyholes, and heartlessness. A picture stopped him cold just as he was about to ask what the book was about. The blade in the picture looked remarkably similar to the one he was still holding. Additionally, there was just a single word above the image: KeyBlade. "Are you done?" inquired Yen Sid. After giving a nod, he put the book back on the table. "As you've most likely surmised, the weapon in your hand is known as a KeyBlade. It is one of the most powerful weapons in existence, and is quite picky about who wields it." Confused, Naruto questioned, "So, it's alive?" "It is more sentient and less alive than anything," he clarified. Naruto said, "So why'd I have it? Why did it choose me of all people?" "It may have something to do with what happened to your world. But first, to understand that, you must understand what it was you encountered on your way here," he said as he raised his hand. An image of the creature he had previously battled emerged over by the corner. He was ready to strike for a second, but then he realized it was only a picture. "The creature you encountered is what is known as a Heartless. The Heartless are creatures of darkness, brought into existence when one loses their hearts to the darkness. They can come in many different forms, but they mostly are creatures of instinct. And one of their main instincts is to gather and collect hearts. Naruto said, "When you say gather hearts, slowly, do you mean they actually rip out someone's heart from their body?" "In a sense," said Yen Sid humbly. "Every living thing has a spiritual and physical side to its existence. The heartless take away people's spiritual side and are also the result of what happens when someone loses that side of themselves. So no, they don't take away a person's physical heart. They are drawn to the strongest people they can reach because they have an innate desire to win hearts. Therefore, there are only two possible meanings when the heartless show up. One is that they are targeting the very center of the world." Naruto felt cold when he heard those words. If the heartless are able to reach the core of a world, they will literally devour it. The closer the world is to the darkness, the easier it will be. And if the heart of a world is eaten up, then the world itself disappears, Naruto concluded softly, implying that his home and his world had been engulfed by these heartless creatures, and that his friends had most likely accompanied them. "So my friends." All he got was a solemn nod. "How am I here, though? Why did I get away with it?" he inquired. "There are a lot of possible explanations. The first is that your heart must have been exceptionally strong. Like you, people with strong hearts can occasionally flee to other worlds when a world has been overtaken by evil. So my friends might have been able to escape?" Desperately, he asked. As he watched the blonde slump over in relief, Yen Sid remarked, "Yes, they might have been able to make off in time. Now, the KeyBlade is the second reason I think you made it off your world. The KeyBlade is a weapon of exceptional quality. Any lock can be opened by it, and vice versa. Additionally, it has the ability to release hearts that have been imprisoned by darkness. This explains why the KeyBlade is so feared by the heartless." "What do you mean that they are afraid of it?" blurting out, Naruto said. "One of the few weapons that can harm the heartless is the KeyBlade. They fear it because it can also lock away a world's heart, preventing a heartless person from consuming it. All of that is possible with the KeyBlade." Looking at the weapon in his hand, Naruto questioned in wonder, "What do you mean the KeyBlade can lock a world's heart away? You mentioned that it could lock anything, but..." "Yes, as I previously stated, the KeyBlade is an extremely potent weapon. You see, there are keyholes in every world, but they are in different places. You can use the KeyBlade to permanently lock it away from the heartless if you are able to locate it." For a long time, they were silent while Yen Sid observed Naruto and he tried to take it all in. Although Naruto had a lot of questions right now, only 3 of them were more important at the time. "I just have a few more questions, sir," he replied. "If you don't mind, sir." Yen Sid merely gestured with his hand. Naruto went on to describe his birth circumstances and his eventual friendship with Kurama, saying, "First, before I ask, there's something you need to know in order to answer my question. So I was just wondering if you had any clue as to what happened to him." I've not heard of something like this in quite a while," he said while gazing into the distance. "If I had to hazard a guess, that while you have his energy, chakra I believe you said, he may be somewhere out there with yours." Even though he wasn't entirely sure how it could have happened, it was a believable idea, but anything was possible given the recent events. "What comes next? How can I get to where I'm going?" Although he didn't seem to be the kind to laugh much, Yen Sid raised an eyebrow at his directness, but mainly in amusement. He stood up, walked to the door across the room, and motioned for Naruto to follow him. He looked at the clothes he was wearing and said, "Before I send you on your way you might want to get a new set of clothes because they might not last the journey." Naruto didn't know what he was talking about for a moment until he glanced down at his clothing. He could only rub his head sheepishly, and his jacket and pants were torn and holed, and the zipper appeared to be broken. "There are 3 good fairies inside. I'm sure they'll have no trouble helping you with your clothes," he said, adding, "I'll have a way to get you when you get out." After giving him a strange look, Naruto exclaimed, "Why are you doing so much for me?" His face flushed with shame, and he stammered at the raised eyebrow. "I want to know why you are assisting me. It's not that I don't value it, but..." Yen Sid gave him a long look before answering, "Like you, I was a key bearer when I was younger. I now stand in front of you as a retired master who prioritizes teaching young KeyBlade wielders like you my wisdom and counsel." After a moment of just staring, Naruto broke into a smile. "Thank you, old man," he shouted, then hurried into the adjacent room, leaving Yen Sid gaping at him in confusion. An elderly man? Hey, is anyone present? Naruto called out as he walked into the small room, which was a simple cream-colored space with a large cabinet and variously shaped mirrors covered by sheets. 3 women, one in red, one in green, and the third in blue, were standing in the corner of the room. They must be the fairies Yen Sid had mentioned. Hello, young man, said the red-clad fairy, how may we assist you? Yen Sid asked if you could get me a new outfit. Slowly, he asked. She replied, oh of course, where are my manners? That's Merryweather, this is Fauna, and my name is Flora. I'll have no trouble assisting you. They buzzed around him, their wands apparently taking his measurements, and then, after a while, they gathered in front of him, their measuring completed, and flew over to him on tiny wings he hadn't noticed at first glance. All right, young man, are you prepared? Merryweather inquired. You'd better think so, his face was smiling as he shouted. As they lifted their wands, Flora said, all right, girls. 1, 2, 3. With a burst of red, blue, and green light, he was suddenly dressed entirely differently, and as he examined himself, he noticed that he was now wearing a black turtleneck with a zip-up, sleeveless top and a vest of orange and blue. He was wearing blue gloves with a metal plate on the back of each hand and a dimmed pair of orange pants with kunai and shuriken holsters on each leg. Wow, said Naruto, I'm so grateful, Fauna said, it was no problem dear, as she showed her satisfaction with their useful work. I wish you luck as you travel. Merryweather uttered those words. Once again, thank you. As he walked out of the room, Naruto said. Are you prepared? Yen Sid said, staring out of the window at something, without even turning to look at him. Ready as I'll ever be, Naruto said, trying to see what Yen Sid was staring at. A ship made entirely of blocks appeared to be just outside the window, and Naruto shot Yen Sid a curious glance as he tried to figure out how he was going to use this device. This is referred to as a gummy ship, a vessel constructed from gummy blocks, a unique substance that enables interstellar travel. You might encounter other ships with callous people while navigating between the worlds. They will attempt to attack you, but fortunately, you will have the ship's weapons to protect yourself. Looking at Naruto's expression, he concluded, it won't be that complicated so you have nothing to worry about. A moment later, Naruto was seated inside the ship, his hands on the controls, the top open. Naruto opened his mouth to say, Yen Sid, I can't thank you enough, but was interrupted by Yen Sid's raised hand. Young man, don't think about it. It was enjoyable, Yen Sid said. I hope your journey is safe and I wish you luck. The lid closed and the ship took off, fading into obscurity and then vanishing entirely with a final nod to the former KeyBlade master. As Yen Sid returned to his desk to finish his work, he thought, that young man is a special one. The young blonde had no idea what was ahead of him as he raced through the stars, but he was more than ready to take on the challenge. It was official. Naruto was definitely, completely lost. Naruto sighed in exasperation as he peered out the gummy ship's window. It had been a few hours since he had left Yen Sid's tower, and the excitement of embarking on a new adventure had worn off at least an hour or two ago, so he was just observing the stars as it cruised along the galaxy at a leisurely pace, wondering if his friends were doing okay. He was aware that they had strong hearts, so it was quite possible that they had been transported to another world, and he wondered what that would be like. He had already visited Yen Sid's tower, which was a unique experience. He was just thinking about whether other worlds had ramen when the alarm went off, and when he ran back to his chair, he saw that a whole fleet of ships were approaching. He strapped himself in and pressed all the buttons he could, firing lasers and missiles at the invading ships. But being the novice that he was, he pressed the wrong button by mistake and launched himself into hyperspace. Although he was able to escape, he was horrified to discover that he had lost total control of the ship. He hoped for a gentle landing as he screamed at the top of his lungs as he hurtled through space. The first thing he noticed was that he was lying on a comfortable bed. The second was that he was alive and in perfect health, except for a few bruises and bumps. After a while, he decided it was safe to open his eyes and discovered that he was lying in a rather large bed with cream-colored blankets that matched the room's walls. It appeared to be a very costly hotel room, to be honest, and as he was putting his feet down, he heard the door open. When he looked up, he saw a girl with short black hair, a black headband, a zip-up vest, long black socks that were mostly hidden by brown boots, and shorts that were both black and brown. "Hey, look, you're conscious." She smiled broadly and said, "We were beginning to worry about you. You've been absent for some time." "We?" Confusion compelled Naruto to inquire. She stuck her head back outside the door and said, "Yeah, let me call them in," saying, "Come on in, guys, he's awake." 3 more people entered as she drew her head back in, the first being a woman with long brown hair in a braid and green eyes, wearing a carmine pink and white top held up by a string around her neck. She wore a pink dress with a white horizontal stripe near the bottom underneath this top, and underneath that she wore another dress, which was white and a little longer than the first. She also wore a red ribbon in her hair and light brown boots. A man with long brown hair entered second, wearing a black jacket with fur at the collar, black gloves, black shoes with zippers, a silver griever necklace, and a white undershirt. Naruto was immediately reminded of Sasuke before he left the village because he exuded a sullen, brooding, lonesome aura that suggested he had committed a terrible act at some point in the past. An older man, probably in his 40s, wearing goggles and a necklace with a rectangular charm that appeared to be made of wood, was the last to enter. Wearing a white t-shirt, loose blue pants with an orange waistband, and a toothpick like it was the last day, he had short blonde hair. Ignoring Naruto's poor squawk at being called Blondie, she said, "Listen up, Blondie. This is Aerith, Leon, and Sid. And I'm the great ninja Yuffie. Hi, I'm Naruto. If it's okay with you, may I ask where I am?" he said. In a voice that strangely sounded like Hinata, Aerith said, "You're in a hotel in Traverse Town," adding, "We found you in your gummy ship just outside the town gates. How did you fare?" He said cautiously, "Well, I was looking for my friends and I was attacked by a bunch of Heartless, not sure if they knew what the Heartless were, but judging by the expressions on their faces, he was certain they did. I guess I must have ended up here," he said. "Well kid, if you're looking for your friends you ended up in the right place," said Sid. "What did you mean? This place is called Traverse Town for a reason," Leon explained, "because anyone who is fortunate enough to survive the destruction of their world ends up in Traverse Town, which is made up of the remains of worlds whose hearts have been stolen by the Heartless. In essence, this location serves as a haven for those who have lost their worlds to the Callous." Unbelievably, he had landed on a world where his friends might have ended up. If he was lucky, he might even have found Kurama here. He asked abruptly, remembering, "Wait, what happened to my gummy ship?" "It was pretty badly damaged when you crashed here," Sid said, "but I'm going to get it back up and running quickly." "Really? Many thanks, old man," as Naruto exclaimed. He couldn't help but notice how amiable everyone seemed. "An elderly man?" Sid cried out in surprise, "I'm only 40.2. You brat, I'm not that old." "What was the name you gave me?" Naruto yelled, and a moment later, they were snarling at one another like a dog pair. The display of immaturity caused the other 3 people in the room to merely sigh. Following minutes of the bizarre exchange between Sid and Naruto, Aerith suggested that Naruto be shown around the town to check on his friends, and both Sid and the blonde were on board, since he needed to complete the ship's repairs. The majority of the survivors were located in the first district, which was the most tranquil of the districts and featured cobbled streets, wooden homes, and a few stores. Naruto, Yuffie, and Aerith were currently exploring this area. Although Naruto had considered telling the other districts, second and third, about the KeyBlade, he decided to save that small surprise for when he needed it because they were infested with Heartless crawling. For a moment, he was taken aback by the fact that Huey, Dewey, and Louie were a trio of talking ducks, but then he recalled all the talking summoning animals on his world as they showed him the various shops. Getting some much needed supplies, he and the 2 girls looked around the first district again to see if any of his friends had made it, but this wasn't the strangest thing he'd seen. It wasn't looking good so far. He had described their appearance to them in vague terms, so that hadn't been the issue. They simply weren't present. Aerith sat on the steps leading to Sid's shop and said to a gloomy blonde, "Hey, it's okay, maybe they just haven't made it here yet." "Yes, perhaps they will arrive shortly, you never know, do you?" Yuffie exclaimed with joy. "I guess you're right," he said, adding, "Besides, we haven't searched everywhere yet, have we?" The 2 girls exchanged a perplexed glance. "What are you saying?" "They could have ended up there after all," he said, getting to his feet. "The other districts. But that's not a safe place. There are heartless crawling all over that place, Yuffie cried. Aerith nodded, looking concerned too, and Naruto just smiled at them before extending his hand and using his KeyBlade, almost laughing at their shocked expressions before answering. I think he'll be okay. Naruto examined the second district critically, unsure whether his friends were in the third district or this one until he personally checked. He had left Yuffie and Aerith in the first district, instructing them to watch in case his friends appeared there. The second district was a lot different from the first district, with buildings made of a different material of what it was. Naruto was in Soraya instead of wood. Along with the hotel where Naruto had found himself waking up, there were a lot more than in the previous district, but there was also a stone road with a big staircase. Before he had even taken 2 steps, he was surrounded by heartless creatures that, to be honest, looked like ants and were relatively easy to handle. As he slashed through the last of the shadow, another group appeared, this one different from the previous one, and to be honest, at first glance they reminded Naruto of a knight from a fairy tale. This is when things got a little more complicated. A second look at them immediately dispelled that idea. They wore silver wristbands, black shoes with silver trim ending in spiral toes, and a silver knight's helm with a yellow stripe at the base of the curled silver plume and 2 angular, eye-like spirals on the front. Wearing a bluish, black bodysuit with the heartless emblem and purple inverted emblems trimmed in gold on the knees, their muscular bodies moved erratically, staring at him with frenzied eyes before leaping to attack. As they all came down on him, he rolled away and slashed left and right with his KeyBlade, taking 2 down before they could hit him. Since it was only a minor scratch, he wasn't really complaining. He was doing well until one of them got behind him and grabbed his legs, bringing him down, but then they decided to work together against him rather than individually. In an attempt to repel the other's charge, Naruto swung the KeyBlade wildly, but instead he blasted them all with a blaze of fire, knocking them all back and destroying them. After a moment of confusion, he blinked before turning to face the callous person who was still holding his legs and driving the blade straight through them. He stood up and stared at his KeyBlade for a long moment, as if he was seeing it for the first time, before exclaiming, "Cool." Due to the hordes of heartless people he encountered, he found very few people in the second district. However, he made good use of them, practicing his newly acquired fire ability on them and coming up with creative uses for it. He wondered what else the KeyBlade could do, and after searching the bell tower, the hotel, the gizmo shop, and every alleyway, he found nothing but heartlessness. Since none of his friends were in the second district, he finally let out a disappointed sigh. Nevertheless, he had one more district to explore. Perhaps he would discover something there. He never realized the cloaked figure observing him from a distance as he headed for the third district. In stark contrast to the other two, the third district was smaller but felt more contemporary, resembling a plaza with a small, seemingly empty house beside him and what appeared to be a golden fountain in the distance. He descended the stairs into the open space of the district, only to be ambushed by a number of other cold-blooded individuals. It was becoming a little annoying to be ambushed, but he chose to take advantage of the situation because he was learning a lot. This time they were different from the previous ones, with a conical, smooth body and a heartless emblem emblazoned on the chest. They had glowing yellow eyes, just like the other heartless he'd seen, and wore a conical yellow hat with a thin, curled tip and a jagged brim. Their feet, which seemed useless because they were floating, had 3 small, thin toes. They were all different colors, some blue, some red, some green, and some yellow. He quickly learned the meaning of the colors when the yellow ones caused tiny lightning bolts to rain down on him and the red ones threw fireballs at him. They buzzed around his head like tiny insects as he attempted to swat them with his KeyBlade, and if they hadn't been so small and swift, they would have been simple to defeat. He eventually made some progress after avoiding fireballs, lightning bolts, and ice shards, reducing their numbers to 3 blue, red, and yellow, respectively. They started to circle each other, spinning faster and faster until they were just a blur, and Naruto braced himself when he noticed a green orb forming in the middle of them. They were staring each other down when they did something strange. Then, rather suddenly, they came to a halt, pointed at him, and blasted the orb, vanishing as their last bit of strength was expended. The KeyBlade, which was more powerful than Naruto had first believed as he struggled to hold it back as it clashed with his blade, was thrown in front of him in the hopes that it would halt the attack. Naruto was thrown into the alley and rolled the remaining distance down it after the orb exploded a second later, sending him flying back several feet. He moaned as he rose slowly, massaging his sore back, and surveyed the explosion's damage, whistling as he saw tiny flames and embers everywhere, including on the door behind him. He inhaled deeply as he slowly relaxed. His friends were obviously not here on this earth, and he had no idea that the Heartless were this intelligent. They certainly hadn't appeared to be. He would have to look on another planet because the third district was small enough that he could see the stairs from behind and see that it was empty. He was about to begin walking when he heard a noise behind him, which made him cautious. The door with the fire symbol on it was slowly rising when he turned, and he moved slowly inside, following a narrow path that led to a lake with a big house with a roof that resembled a hat sitting in the center of it. He didn't want to call forth Kurama's chakra just to cross a small lake, so he avoided using the stones that floated in the water along the path, which appeared sturdy enough to support him if he attempted to use them to get across. Before arriving at the house, he hurried from one stone to another as he made his way to the lake's edge, and when he knocked on the door, it opened slowly and without any warning. "Hey!" he called out as he poked his head inside and discovered something rather unexpected. A very disorganized room with numerous books and items he had never seen before scattered across the floor, with a small set of stairs leading up to the top in the center. A man who appeared elderly sat at the top. He was pale, had very thin arms and legs, a big nose, and black eyes that were obscured by glasses. He had a long, floor-length beard that was all white, bushy eyebrows, and an odd-looking beard. When Naruto entered, he looked up and a big smile spread across his face. He was wearing a sky blue cloak that ended just above his ankles and had big, floppy sleeves. He also had a long, pointed hat that was the same color as the robes and just as floppy, and it sat on top of his head. "Hi, young man. Can I assist you?" he asked in a cheerful tone. Hesitantly, he replied, "Yes. My name is Naruto, and I was just wondering if you've..." The elderly man interrupted him by leaping from his chair and running surprisingly fast down the stairs, stopping directly in front of him. "So you're Naruto," he yelled. "Yes, Yen Sid told me all about you." "You heard about me from old man Yen Sid?" As the elderly man examined him intently, Naruto asked in a state of mild daze. "An elderly man? Huh? Didn't old Yen Sid get a kick out of that?" Yes, he told me about you," he said, disregarding the fact that he appeared to be just as old. "You got a KeyBlade, didn't you? Are you also trying to find your friends?" "Yes." When he realized the man had not yet given him his name, he trailed off. "Do you know anything about them?" I apologize, but where did my manners disappear to?" "My name is Merlin the Wizard," he said, a little flustered. "A wizard? As in magic, right?" inquired Naruto bewilderedly. "You're right, kid." As he concluded his examination of Naruto, Merlin yelled, "And based on what I've seen, you've already used a little fire magic, huh?" "Yeah, I did," I said, curious to see where the elderly man was taking this. Good, he repeated. "As I mentioned, Yen Sid got in touch with me recently and informed me of your meeting with him. He taught me a few tricks, but he also made me watch out for your friends, and I believe I've located one of them." "You have? Where are they?" shouted Naruto, scanning the area. He said, "Just over here," and Naruto moved to the opposite side of the room. He looked around frantically, but there was nobody else there, so he turned to face the elderly man, who merely pointed down, and his eyes widened in surprise as they moved southward. It was, without a doubt, Kurama, and he was utterly adorable. The claws, the red fur, the strange ears, the 9 tails were all present, and it appeared as if he had been enormously reduced in size when they had been separated. He was sleeping soundly now, lying down in a small round bed that was ideal for an animal his size, and when Naruto saw the tiny Kyuubi in front of him, he could only stammer, unable to come up with a coherent sentence. What became of him? He eventually succeeded in getting out, lowering himself to his knees and gently nudging Kurama to try to wake him up. As Merlin stood beside him, he said, "I'm not quite sure, to be perfectly honest with you. He just showed up outside my door a few days ago, and he's been like that ever since. I've had no success waking him up." "You haven't?" Naruto exclaimed in surprise. "Not a peep," Merlin said sadly, and Naruto could feel his chakra coursing through Kurama as though it were his own, but he still didn't know how that one had happened. Naruto just stared at the sleeping fox while continuing to run his hands through his fur. Merlin abruptly said, "Come on, young one. I still have a few tricks to teach you." He then leapt onto the platform and gestured for Naruto to follow suit. After giving Kurama another glance, he found himself ascending into a different room that was a deep red color and, in contrast to the previous one, completely empty. "Are you fond of magic tricks now?" After some time, a happy Merlin and a slightly burned Naruto, with even more twitchy hair than usual, were lowered back down into the first room. "Don't you think that went well, my boy?" With a smile that Naruto wanted to snatch from his face, Merlin said. "Yeah, sure," he said, attempting to gather his thoughts. "Oh, calm down," Merlin complained. "I put it out, and you weren't burned that badly, eventually." "Whatever you say, old man. So, what will you do at this point?" did Merlin ask. "I'm not sure. Try to find my other friends probably," Naruto replied. "And find a way to wake Kurama up and fix what happened to us." "Are you okay with observing him while I'm away?" Naruto addressed Merlin. He replied, "Of course not, it's not like he'll be any bother," adding that he would be awakened by my efforts. "My boy, I hope your journey is filled with success." "Thanks, I get the feeling I'll need it." Like Yen Sid, Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by a deep, solemn voice from behind him as he made his way back through the 3rd district, his mind buzzing with what he had found. At least Kurama was safe for the time being, and he knew where his chakra had gone as well. It declared, "You are a mistake." As he summoned his KeyBlade and spun on his heel, he dropped into his stance and saw a stooped figure in a brown cloak, his face hidden but clearly a man based on the voice. "Who are you?" Naruto inquired. Ignoring Naruto's query, the figure declared, "You are a mistake. You are not a part of the original design." "An error?" Confused, Naruto uttered, "What are you talking about?" The figure reiterated, "You are a mistake, and mistakes must be eliminated." A huge shadow overtook Naruto before he could respond, and he turned to see a giant of a Heartlessa, a huge, muscular, black-skinned humanoid Heartlessa rise up behind him. Its arms were long, and it had 2 small, twisted wings on its back. Its legs were rather short, and its feet were very thin and curled upward. The Heartless's stomach had a huge, heart-shaped hole that ran straight through from front to back, and only its tiny, glowing yellow eyes were visible, while its head was encased in dozens of twisted, black tentacles. The cloaked figure had vanished when Naruto turned around, but he had to avoid a big hand that was sweeping at him. The giant Heartless began to flail in agony as it attempted to extinguish the fire, but Naruto took advantage of the situation by dodging another one and then launching a huge stream of fire at it, coating his KeyBlade in a swirling wind as he did so. In the time it took to catch its breath, the Heartless had formed a large attack that was held between his hands. He slashed down on its head, sending it to the ground and leaving a large mark on its face. Naruto landed heavily on one knee as he panted in from that last attack. The Heartless watched as the remnants of its attack dissipated, revealing a still-standing Naruto, encased in what appeared to be crystals of light. Naruto had only a moment to watch in shock as it slammed the attack directly on him, covering nearly the entire ground in dark energy. With a heavy pant, Naruto dispelled the shield as the Heartless fell to its knees, and he could only thank his lucky stars that Merlin had the wisdom to teach him a defensive spell. Naruto briefly believed it was giving up, but then it began launching dark beams from the hole in its stomach that resembled a heart. He ducked and weaved his way back to the Heartless, hoping that this final blow would put an end to it. Recalling Kakashi's lesson on the elements and their interactions, he sprayed wind on his KeyBlade once more before jumping once more in the direction of the Heartless's head. He conjured a strong flame just before he struck it, which blended with the blade's pre-existing wind coating. All 3 districts could hear the ensuing explosion. He summoned that Heartless to get rid of him, and Naruto watched with a detached expression as the Heartless faded back into darkness. As far as he knew, Toby was incapable of calling forth the Heartless, so it couldn't have been him. He'd have to be careful around that one, whoever it was in that cloak, because they were dangerous, really dangerous. Naruto was confronted by Yuffie before he had even returned 2 steps into the 1st district. "Are you all right?" Everyone heard the explosion, she inquired. "What took place?" "A Heartless happened," he said, "a Heartless that was really, really big. But it's gone now, so you don't need to worry about it." Aerith said, "That's good, behind Yuffie, with Sid and Leon beside her. Did you find your friends? He smiled slightly and said, I found one, but there was a problem with him. He has changed from his former self. But don't worry, I'll figure out how to assist him. She smiled and said, I'm sure you will. Good news, brat, Sid said. All your ships are fixed up. You can start at any moment. Really? I appreciate it, you sour old man. With a silly smile, Naruto said. What did you call me? Sid uttered those words in frustration. Oh, just ignore him, Yuffie said. So I suppose you're going to be gone now? Yeah, thanks again for the help you guys, he replied. Yuffie complained that he didn't really help, but Leon ignored him and said, Listen, I was wondering if you could do me a favor. It was no problem, Leon said. What is that? Naruto inquired. Leon remarked, there's another kid out there with the KeyBlade, featuring a red jumpsuit, a white and black jacket, blue eyes, yellow shoes, and brown spiky hair. Could you help him if you locate him? When we last saw him, he appeared hopeless, and you at least appear to know what you're doing with that thing. An additional key bearer. Sure, if I see him, I'll help him out, he said softly to himself. What is his name? Sora. Sora, he said, closing his eyes. I understand. Is there anything else I should know? It took Naruto a moment to realize what he had just said, but he quickly recovered. Well, he's traveling with a talking duck that knows magic and a dog with a shield, Leon said, disregarding the ridiculousness of his statement. All right, if I see them I'll try and help them out, Naruto replied. Thanks, kid. Naruto was sitting inside the freshly fixed gummy ship when they were discovered a moment later, just outside the first district's doors. Good luck, Naruto, Aerith replied. I hope you can find the rest of your friends out there. Yes, you will have no trouble finding them, Yuffie exclaimed with enthusiasm. Sid said, we'll be seeing ya, kid. But Leon just gave him a slight nod, and Naruto just waved as he lifted into the air before once more soaring into the stars. Naruto sighed as he emerged into what appeared to be an overgrown forest, and judging by the fact that he avoided crashing this time, he appeared to be learning how to drive and maneuver the gummy ship. He had barely had time to reflect on his success when he heard a loud explosion somewhere above him. He spun on his heel and saw the wreckage of an aircraft falling toward the water, and he could see 3 people falling, thanks to his good vision. On his way to the crash site, he noticed how strange some of the animals were, like they were robotic or something, and he hurried through the trees and greenery, knowing that he wouldn't reach them in time, but hoping he'd be able to help if they survived. 2 of them appeared to be children. He made every effort to avoid their view, but when he heard 2 individuals approaching him clad in black suits that concealed the majority of their bodies and brandishing a strange-looking weapon, he had to halt and hide in order to hear what they had to say about the explosion. One of the men remarked, but do you think we got him? We got them, of course. Who do you suppose could make it through such a thing? Said the second one. However, they're supers. The first said, and I heard the daughter could make force fields or something. Look, they wouldn't be able to do anything against the boss's weapon even if they did survive, which I doubt. Not to mention the additional factor. What else? Not really sure, but I heard the boss was real excited about it, now if you ask me. Clearly these had to be the bad guys if they were willing to kill a family, and Naruto ignored the rest of the conversation, hoping they were all right. Even though it was now nightfall, he could see a beach as he approached the edge of the forest, and he could also make out 3 people crawling toward the shore. The oldest of them might have been him, but she was moving strangely, as if she had no bones at all. He hid as they fell to the ground, hoping to learn more about them before he revealed himself to them. The red-haired one, what a trooper, I'm so proud of you, said. The blonde said, thanks mom, indicating that this was the family the men were referring to. He leaned forward from the tree he was hiding behind in an attempt to attract their attention, and they immediately snapped their heads to him, their eyes wide with fear. He made a shushing noise with his hand and motioned for them to follow, and a moment later they decided to try their luck and followed, exhausted as they were. Following introductions, the mother, whose name he discovered was Helen, spoke. He led them to a cave he had spotted on his way to the beach and built a fire for them. She told the children, I think your father is in trouble, as they sat by the fire to try to dry off, and Naruto, who was watching from the entrance, overheard the conversation. If you haven't noticed, Mom, Violet said glumly, we're not doing so hot either. I'm going to look for him, Helen said while standing, and that means you're in charge until I get back, Violet. What? Dash cried out. You heard her, Violet boastfully said. Helen took 2 black masks out of a small bag, 1 for herself and 2 for her children. Your most valuable asset is your identity, so put these on. Keep it safe. Additionally, use your powers if something goes wrong. But you said. I am aware of what I said, Helen screamed, and Naruto could tell she felt bad about it right away. He listened to her warn her children about the men on the island, and he had to agree with her because he had learned this early in life. He just hoped they didn't have to kill anyone, but he had to wonder what kind of powers they possessed. She walked over to him and said, Be careful, I'll be back in the morning. Would you like me to accompany you or look after your children? He inquired. To be honest, I'd rather have you watch the kids, but I'm not sure how much trust I should place in you right now. It would improve my mood. Besides, she knew her children could care for themselves if necessary, and it wasn't like she had many choices. All right, before you leave, I heard some of the men conversing a while ago. They mentioned that their boss had a weapon of some sort, among other things. Thus, exercise caution when you're out there. She said, thanks for the heads up, and was ready to leave when Violet called out to him. Naruto excused himself and moved deeper into the cave, where he sat beside the fire, where Dash continued to gaze at him. Well, hello, he said clumsily. What are your options? Dash inquired. I apologize. What is your power, exactly? Violet can create force fields and turn invisible, and I can run really fast. What are you able to do? It appears that there were superheroes in this world back then, so that must be what they meant when they said, supers. Well, I've been experiencing some difficulties with my abilities lately, but I can manage this, he said, extending his hand and bringing forth his KeyBlade. Nice. As Violet returned inside wearing her mask, Dash yelled, is that all though? No, but I do have some other skills that are a little destructive, he said, putting down his KeyBlade, so I won't be whipping them out in a closed space like this. Ah, Dash sulked. Violet said, you're Naruto, correct? What are you doing on this island? Really? How I got here was entirely arbitrary. I'm not a local, exactly. What are you saying? The words, I'm from another world, he said with regret. A different planet? Are you saying that you're extraterrestrial? Dash inquired eagerly. Naruto uttered the words, well, I guess you could say that, with hesitation. Why are you here, then? Violet inquired. My entire world. I'm looking for a way to restore it because it was recently destroyed. Uncomfortably, Violet said, oh, I'm sorry, it's all right, enough about me. How about the two of you? Tell me about yourself. Violet sneered. Nothing extraordinary, just going to school and trying to deal with my hyperactive little brother and my embarrassing parents, she said. Hey. Dash let out a loud cry. Well, that's accurate, Violet responded with a shout. After that, they got into a sibling dispute, and Naruto couldn't help but laugh at them both. A short while later, he caught a glimpse of Violet's abilities as she was using her abilities, repeatedly shielding the fire before releasing it and doing the same with the smoke that was created. Dash said, well, not that this isn't fun, but I'm gonna go look around, as he lit a stick and held it up as a torch. What do you suppose is happening here? With a frustrated tone, Violet said, you believe we're on vacation or something? The lives of mom and dad might be in danger, or worse, their marriage. They're married? So the bad guys are trying to ruin mom and dad's marriage? He asked doubtfully. The words, oh forget it, you're so immature, were rolled out by Violet. Okay, I'm gonna go look around, Mom said to stay hidden. He said, I'm not going to leave the cave, as he started to back away. I'll go with him, Violet, Naruto replied, just to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. She said, thank you, as she watched him and her brother leave. Before Naruto spoke up, if only to break the awkward silence, they walked in silence for a short while. So, did you know that I once tricked my village chief? Naruto inquired. He could see the child was very similar to him at that age. You did? His face lit up as he asked. Yes, he was the leader because he was the strongest ninja in the village where I lived. However, he was a huge pervert as well. They carried on in this manner, Naruto entertaining Dash and narrating stories about his numerous memorable antics, until they arrived at what appeared to be a man-made tunnel. What is this? Naruto said, reaching down to touch it. Nice. As his voice reverberated through the lengthy tunnel, Dash said. Naruto said, Dash, I think we should go, as a knot in the pit of his stomach began to grow. A moment later, he felt his hair rustle in the wind. Go. Come on. He yelled as he saw what appeared to be a pillar of flames hurtling in their direction. Realizing he wouldn't be quick enough, he switched into Kyuubi mode and took off, Dash following closely behind. A loud noise behind them caused them to spin on their heel, only to see a rocket take off from one of the mountains, and they hurried to Violet, yanking her from the inside of the cave just before they were struck. Naruto said, This way you two, we need to find some shelter so you can get some rest, as he led the two children into the forest. Naruto sighed wearily as he kept watch over the two sleeping siblings, who would undoubtedly wake up soon, but he had plenty of time to reflect last night. He could see that something sinister was happening here, but he hadn't yet seen anyone callous. They were swarming everywhere in Traverse Town, but here, nothing. He sighed again, something he seemed to be doing a lot of these days, but he honestly didn't know why. He heard Dash yell, but he ignored the glare Dash sent him and took another quick look around the area from the tree he was in. When he turned back, he saw something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He laughed at the expression on his face when he realized he had slept on his sister. Before he could warn him, a loud blaring alarm sounded through the forest. Dash had woken Violet up and was talking to one of those strange-looking birds with the red eyes. What are we going to do? Dash yelled. Go! Naruto exclaimed, leapt from his perch, grabbed their hands, and took off. Where are we heading? Dash inquired. Get out of here. As they ran, Violet yelled, and soon after, they heard a strange whirling noise, and strange flying machines and armed men surrounded them. Behind Naruto, Violet whispered to Dash, remember what Mom said. What? He inquired. Run, Dash. Naruto had already hid himself in the trees when the men turned away from him to watch Dash, and a moment later he took off, leaving only a blur. Violet said this as she became invisible. They're amazing. Acquire the boy. For the moment, he would worry about the men here, so he silently summoned his KeyBlade and aimed it at one of the men, silently shooting a concentrated ball of fire at him, sending him into one of the trees and knocking him out. He turned when he heard more shouting, only to see a stick hitting one of the men. Crap, he didn't know who needed his help more, Dash or Violet, he thought. When he saw the man chasing Violet down into a small pond, he aimed his blade once more and fired again, missing by a narrow margin but managing to knock the gun out of the guy's hand. He was about to aim again when a red and yellow blur appeared out of nowhere, knocking the man down once more. Dash had the man on the ground, punching away quickly until the man was knocked away, and as he was pointing his gun at Dash, he saw Violet leap in front of him, forming a shield around the two of them, and hanging inside while the man continued to shoot. How are things going for you? Dash inquired. I'm not sure, Violet cried out. Keep going no matter what you do, he remarked as he started to roll the orb. Observing his actions, Naruto called forth the Kyuubi's chakra once more, since it was the only way he could match the speed demon's speed. As soon as they saw him, he caught up to them and gave them a thumbs up. When he saw the flying machines again, he gestured forward, but his perspiration stopped when he saw them tearing through it. As they passed them, they saw two additional tag-alongs on the shield, and they continued rolling. Mom. Dad. Hello. They fell quickly into a heap after dropping the shield, and Naruto stopped beside them, ignoring the Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto said, guys, I hate to stop the reunion but we've got some company, and as more men arrived, they all assumed a battle stance and circled menacingly before Helen and her husband swiftly eliminated every man in a matter of seconds. Whoa, Dash and Violet exclaimed, and even Naruto was somewhat taken aback by their level of fighting efficiency. They must have been practicing for years to have that level of cooperation. Before they could celebrate, more appeared, and Dash ran around them, forming a dust screen as they methodically defeated each airship and soldier that is, until they were frozen by a blue light beam. Hey, time out. Whoa, the man said, wearing a black mask like the others, a black bodysuit with a giant S on the front, a black cape, and tall red hair. What are we doing here? He said as he lifted them in the air, the beams still locking them in place. Matching uniforms? Elastigirl. Oh no? You wed an Elastigirl? Oh, and became occupied? there is an entire family of supers? Addressing Naruto, the question is, and who are you? When he noticed the blade in his hand, he interrupted, saying, you're not dressed like the others but... A KeyBlade? Looks like I've hit the jackpot. Oh, this is just too good. Syndrome, as he was known, pointed to a big screen and yelled, huh? Huh? At the moment, they were suspended, their feet and hands imprisoned inside metal spheres that joined to an oval-shaped ring. Oh come on. You gotta admit this is cool. Just like a movie. The robot will emerge dramatically, do some damage, throw some screaming people, and when all hope seems lost, Syndrome will save the day. I'll be a bigger hero than you ever were. Mr. Incredible or Bob said, you mean you killed off real heroes so you could pretend to be one? Oh, I'm real enough to defeat you, and I did it without your precious gifts, your oh so special powers. I'll give them heroics, I'll give them the most spectacular heroics anyone's ever seen. And when I'm old and I've had my fun, I'll sell my inventions so that everyone can be superheroes, everyone can be super. And with everyone super, no one will be, he declared as he left. Wait, yelled Naruto. With his back to them, Syndrome came to a stop. How did you know about the KeyBlade? He turned to him after chuckling softly to himself. Naruto could swear that the man's eyes briefly changed from a drab blue to a spooky golden hue before flashing. Let's just say, a little birdie told me, he said. They were left stranded there as he left through the door, still laughing. Bob said, I'm sorry, in a quiet voice that caught their attention. This is my fault. I've been a lousy father, blind to what I have. So obsessed with being undervalued that I undervalued you. Despite how awkward it was, Naruto could see that this was a private moment intended for family, and there was obviously nothing they could do about it at the time. However, he was pleased to see that Violet was able to roll away in one of her force fields while using it to unplug from the device that was trapping them. Dad? Dash started to inquire. Helen said, don't interrupt your father, please. He sighed, as if he was having trouble finding the right words to complete his sentence, so caught up in the past that You are my greatest adventure, and I almost missed it. I swear, I'm gonna get us out of here. Well, I think Dad has made some excellent progress today, but I think it's time we wind down now, Violet said, pressing the release button. Searching for a way to leave the island, they hurried through the hidden building's hallways. I saw an aircraft hangar on my way in, Helen replied. Straight ahead, I think. As Bob used his extraordinary strength to open the door, they all poured into the room, keeping an eye out for guards who were nowhere to be seen. Each of Naruto and Bob stealthily made their way to the entrance of a van that contained all of the guards. They appeared to be celebrating, as evidenced by the numerous laughs and the popping and spreading of champagne bottles. But when Bob and Naruto leapt into the van, those giggles turned into agonized screams. They proceeded down until they came to the hangar, signaling that all was well. This is the right hangar, but I don't see any jets, Helen replied. Bob stepped in and said, a jet's not fast enough. She asked, what's faster than a jet? Dash said, hey, how about a rocket? Naruto said, great, anyone know how to fly a rocket? According to Violet, you don't have to, just use the coordinates from the last launch. Naruto said, sounds reasonable, despite his lack of knowledge about rocket mechanics. His mind was beginning to race with the technology here. Wait, I bet Syndrome's changed the password by now. How'd I get into the computer? Say please, a voice intercom voiced. Inside a control room, they all turned to see a slender woman with silver hair observing them. Looks like our luck's turning around, Naruto remarked. As they got closer to the city, Naruto watched Helen stretch and hold the van to the jet, and he couldn't help but be amazed by some of the powers in this world. He had met another strong woman. Dash impatiently questioned, are we there yet? Bob said, we'll get there when we get there, with equal impatience. How ya doing, honey? This was the tense response. Do I have to answer? Everyone, strap yourselves down. Like I told you, Bob replied. He checked to make sure he had done it correctly and noticed a sizable, contemporary city approaching. He was able to contain his whoa as he witnessed it. He shouted out the window, here we go, honey, Bob said. Ready, Violet? Ready, now? Helen hurried back into the van as Violet punched the release button a second later, releasing them from the rocket as they roared toward the city. This is going to be difficult, Bob said as he pressed the accelerator. As they attempted to navigate to the robot's location, they quickly recovered their bearings after landing hard on the highway. They drove recklessly through traffic at a startling speed, and the van rolled as they attempted to stop. Ironically, they were able to pull into the ideal parking space. Breathlessly, Bob inquired, "Is everybody okay back there?" Violet remarked, "Super duper dad," as she laughed at Naruto's green face. "But I think Naruto's about to puke." When they heard the cries of the city's residents, they turned to see the massive robot tearing through the city. Bob remarked, "Wait here and stay hidden, I'm going in." One of the two reasons Naruto ignored the couple's conversation was that he sensed something. It was the sensation he always had when a heartless person was around. The robot was on its way to them, which was the second reason. Violet, dash?" he asked, keeping his gaze fixed on it. Violet's terrified scream served as his clue that they had seen it. They attempted to put as much physical distance between themselves and the robot as they could before pushing them out of the van as it was being crushed by it. The robot, however, had different plans. Violet put up a shield around them, but it swiftly cut the three of them off and started hammering away at it. It used its entire body to smash into the shield, shattering it and knocking them to the ground when it realized that hammering alone wouldn't cut through. Bob stopped it as it was about to slam again and instructed them to exit as soon as possible. Naruto, who was carrying Violet, followed Dash as he took off. After hurriedly passing her to Helen, he ran back to the robot that had flung Bob into a nearby structure. When the claws attempted to attack him, he used his KeyBlade to bat them away and, whenever possible, blasted huge waves of fire. When he noticed that nothing was happening to it, he attempted to alter his strategy, but he was grabbed and thrown into a car and down the street. He had to dodge the blasts the robot was aiming at him after it took him a minute to get up. He thought to himself, "This is crazy. The more the fight goes on, the more it learns how I move." With his KeyBlade dropped, he activated Kyuubi's chakra, swiftly charged Odama Rasengan, and hurled it at the enormous robot, causing a huge explosion. He noticed only minor scratches remaining on its shell after a brief period of time for the dust to subside. He was so surprised that there was no damage that he didn't see the claw approaching until he was already in its grasp. It repeatedly and almost knocked him out by slamming him to the ground. Bob threw himself at it and knocked it to the ground, releasing its hold. Thankful that he had used Kyuubi's chakra at that moment, he moaned as he got to his feet. Otherwise, his current situation would be worse. Bob approached him and asked, "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine," admitted Naruto. But his attention had been drawn to something else. "What's that?" "Frozone," Bob said, startled. A slender man was skating on ice ramps that he had made up on the spot. Like Naruto, he attempted to freeze the robot at its joints, but it was discarded. "Bob!" Helen exclaimed as she approached them personally. Naruto exclaimed, "Watch it," as the robot slapped Bob out of the way. Helen quickly leapt away, using her elasticity, and Naruto followed closely behind, avoiding the attack that was directed at them. It readily snapped the claws open again when Frozone attempted to freeze them shut. Until they heard Bob yell, they kept dodging. Syndrome's remote. Since the robot literally stepped on Bob and picked him up at the same time, it was obvious that it had heard as well. One of the claws fully separated from the robot, releasing Bob as well, and Naruto realized he was pressing something. Naruto muttered, "Cool," before rushing in the direction of the robot that was now shooting at Bob. He could see Bob hurling the remote control at Dash, who fled as fast as he could from where he was. He saw that the shots were approaching Dash more and more, so he threw his KeyBlade, which had begun to glow subtly, at the gun, taking it out in the process. This obviously had no effect on the robot, which just began to roll in the direction of Dash and Frozone, who had picked the boy up, smashing everything in its path. When it hit the water, it managed to knock them off balance, but Frozone helped them land safely. After that, they all struggled to pick up the remote, but the robot thwarted their attempts each time. Naruto looked to see the remote picking itself up and floating away after he had once again picked himself up after being flung around by the robot. He yelled, "Way to go, Violet," and dashed to the spot where everyone was waiting. He said, "Let me see it," and he took Dash's remote. The robot stumbled over itself, but it continued to approach them steadily. Dash said, "It's getting closer," in a panic. Helen told Frozone, "Lucius, try to buy us some time," and he set out to try to stall the robot. There was a "press that button again" sound. When they turned around again, Bob was holding the claw that had previously detached from the robot. He yelled, "No, the other one," as the claw started to rotate, "the first one." She retorted, "First button, got it." He yelled, "What are you waiting for? A closer target. You got one shot." She pressed the button just as the robot was almost on top of them, and they all struck the deck when the claw sped past them and went straight through the robot. With bated breath, they watched it fall to the side, dead and lifeless. As they approached it, Dash hesitantly asked, "Is it dead?" "I think so," Bob remarked, bending to examine it. A moment later, as the robot began to rise, they were all blown away. There was something different about it, but it stood jerkily. The hole created by the claw's impact began to leak black goo, and it started to glow with a menacing aura. As they gathered once more, Frozone questioned, "What's going on, Bob?" "No idea," he uttered falteringly. Naruto yelled, "That idiot, he made his robot a heartless," as he brandished his KeyBlade. All of them said, "A what?" He remarked, "No time to explain," as his KeyBlade started to glow. As Naruto pointed his now glowy KeyBlade straight at the robot's heart, he reasoned that it wouldn't take much to kill this thing given all the damage it still had. He yelled, "Take this, you ugly bastard," as a burst of intense light struck its inky heart. Before the robot exploded in a spectacular manner, there was a brief period of total silence during which a big heart was visible floating away from it before completely disappearing. They exchanged glances before they burst out laughing. They heard the applause at that point. From wherever they were hiding, the city's residents had emerged to give them a hearty round of applause for saving their lives. Frozone remarked, "Just like old times," while Bob gave him a shoulder pat. "Oh, hurt then too." Naruto found himself in a government vehicle with the rest of the family, traveling to the Par residence. Before Helen reprimanded him, he and Dash were playing with the windows. Violet rolled her eyes at the lack of maturity displayed, and they laughed quietly to themselves. When Dash told his father, "That was so cool when you threw that car," he replied, "Not as cool as you running on water," which caused Dash to go on a brief tirade about how awesome they were all before he passed out in his chair. As they all listened to the strange voicemails left by the babysitter they had hired for their youngest, Naruto opened his mouth to say something but stopped himself. The poor girl's cries of agony, torture, and suffering were extremely upsetting. The fact that she calmly thanked them for calling a substitute babysitter when it was clear they hadn't was even more unsettling. When the car arrived at the house, they all hurried out, but as soon as they stepped inside, they were motionless. They were met with a rather unpleasant sight. Syndrome laughed in a way that was more than sinister while holding a sleeping Jack. He remarked, "Shush, the baby's sleeping. You five took away my future, I'm simply returning the favor. Oh, don't worry, I'll be a good mentor, supportive, encouraging, everything you weren't. And hey, while I'm at it, I'll even teach him how to control the power of darkness," he said as the color of his eyes changed to golden. He grinned and said, "And in time, who knows, he might make a good sidekick," before shoving them aside and running out of the house. As they fled the house in the hopes of doing something, they noticed something strange. As though he were being held down and had crawls all over him, Syndrome twisted and jerked into the air. Helen's voice was panicked as she asked, "Something's happening, what's happening?" However, Naruto could see that Jack was beating the living daylights out of Syndrome and changing into some sort of monster. Helen said to Bob, "We have to stop him, throw something." "I can't, I might hit Jack. Bob, throw me," she exclaimed. He swiftly lifted her and threw her straight at a Jack that was now falling. After making sure she was safe, Naruto saw that Syndrome was getting closer and used his KeyBlade once more. He said softly, "Oh, please work like before," and then he threw it straight at Syndrome. The man's flying was thrown off balance when the blade struck and totally broke one of his rocket boots. Before yelling down at them, he grabbed his jet and regained his bearings. He laughed uncontrollably until he noticed the car speeding in his direction. "This isn't the end of it, I will get your son eventually," he exclaimed. Before the whole thing exploded, it struck the jet, causing a huge explosion that blasted him back into the turbines and tore him to pieces. The explosion arrived as Helen and Naruto's KeyBlade did. Fortunately, they discovered they were still alive, protected by one of Violet's shields, as they all gathered around one another. Helen said, "That's my girl," with pride as she looked at Violet. As he watched his KeyBlade glow a gentle purple before shaking violently as the smoke cleared, Naruto became slightly more preoccupied. As Naruto lifted his KeyBlade into the air and released a beam of light, a keyhole-shaped light inside the now demolished powerhouse started to glow softly. If one listened closely enough, a faint locking sound could be heard. Behind him, he heard Dash ask, "Does this mean we have to move again?" Which made everyone laugh. "Oh man," uttered someone. A young boy riding a bike was staring at them with wide eyes when they turned around. That was totally wicked. The family laughed even harder, and Naruto just stood there staring, feeling as though he was missing the joke. Dash questioned, "Do you have to go so soon?" Until they could find a decent place to live, they were standing behind the hotel where they were now staying. "My race is in a few days." Naruto patted the boy's head and said, "I wish I could, but I've got a job to do out there, help some people ya know. And besides, I know for a fact you'll do good in any race you're in." "Thanks for all the help, Naruto, we really appreciated it," Helen replied. Bob trailed off, "If you ever need anything." Naruto just gave a nod. Before he was swallowed up by a ball of light and returned to the gummy ship, he sent them one final wave and got one in return from everyone, including a blushing Violet. He let out a deep sigh. He remarked, "I guess that was the keyhole Yen Sid told me about I locked back there," reflecting on the peculiar behavior of his KeyBlade. His mind kept returning to Syndrome. Who had mentioned the KeyBlade to him? Even better, who, despite his lack of success, taught him how to harness the power of darkness. Even though it only took one blast from his KeyBlade to destroy it, it didn't appear to him that it had been used effectively. Who was initially teaching people how to use the power of darkness was the issue with the situation. It had to be someone dangerous, if not a little careless. Before he made the decision to switch to autopilot in order to get some sleep, he couldn't help but wonder who had it out for him as he blasted through the stars. The pain from being thrown about like a rag doll was still there. Naruto blinked quickly as he attempted to recover from the confusion caused by the gummy ship's mode teleportation. He believed he would never grow accustomed to it. He looked around at the world he had landed on, and a sharp gasp came out of his mouth. With black storm clouds obscuring every part of the sky, it was merely a wasteland. He could make out in the distance what appeared to be the ruins of a town that had been devastated by an outside force. He saw numerous footprints as he approached, giving the impression that the residents were fleeing something. It was strange that the footprints ended right at the town's edge, as if they had never gone farther. It was a disturbing idea. There was a deafening silence as he dashed through the town in search of survivors. There was no indication that anyone had lived in the town for a very long time, aside from the fact that it existed. He was about to depart and return to his gummy ship when he suddenly found himself encircled by a horde of callous people. However, these were not like those he had seen previously, though its glowing yellow eyes reminded him of the small shadow Heartless he'd first seen on Traverse Town. These had a more humanoid sort of body than the others. It appeared to be very muscular and had long, crooked antennae that protruded from its head and ran down its back. It had 5-fingered claws that looked extremely sharp, and its veins were dark blue. The horde fell upon him, and he called forth his KeyBlade. He moved swiftly, slicing his way through the attacks that seemed to come from everywhere at once as he dodged and ducked. In addition to being stronger than the others he had met, they also appeared to be more intelligent. They appeared to have some kind of plan as they battled, cooperating to try and defeat him. After just a few minutes, he was covered in numerous cuts and scratches from the numerous Neo shadows that surrounded him, though he was also able to eliminate a sizable portion of them. They all appeared to shake violently just as he was regaining his breath, and then they all came together to face him. When hundreds and hundreds of Neo shadows rained down on him, his eyes widened, and he couldn't help but wonder if this was how his opponents felt when he rained his Bushin down on them. To fend them off, he lifted his KeyBlade and cast his Reflect spell, but then he realized his spell was different. The shield was once completely clear, but now it was tinted purple. He noticed that his KeyBlade and the shield were the same color, which oddly made him think of Violet's barrier. As the Heartless kept bouncing off the barrier, he thought, cool. At that moment, he became aware of his enhanced shield's second effect. It immediately engulfed the Callous, who touched it in a purple bubble before dissolving into emptiness. He inhaled and let go of the barrier at the same moment that he activated Kurama's chakra and began destroying the horde of Heartless that surrounded him. He was able to make a significant dent in the mass of creatures by combining skill, speed, and ingenuity. He turned to face the seemingly limitless horde of creatures as more appeared to cover the gaps he had made, essentially starting over. Even though he could see that his spells were getting stronger, his fire was shooting out in bigger gulfs, and his wind was cutting through all of the numerous enemies with greater speed, ferocity, and sharpness, he was still becoming extremely frustrated. Like the Heartless, he froze just as he was about to destroy another. After a bone-chilling roar reverberated throughout the area, the Heartless vanished and the darkness returned, leaving Naruto to face this latest danger alone. He stumbled a little at what he saw. The creature appeared to be a hybrid of a lion, a bear, a buffalo, a wolf, and a wild boar. It had brown fur, bright blue eyes, and a slightly hunched figure. It wore a ragged purple cape and dark pants. It took Naruto a moment to realize that the beasts were not attacking him and to notice the intelligent expression in their eyes. The beast approached him slowly, but he had not yet let his guard down. It asked Naruto, "Who are you?" and caught him completely off guard. "Why are you here?" Although he answered somewhat shakily, it took him a moment to gather himself enough to respond. He said, "My name's Naruto," with more assurance than he currently felt. "Do you know what happened here?" Before responding, the beast gave a snarling growl. His words were harsh. "Those creatures you were just fighting happened," he said. "They came out of nowhere and destroyed the town and taking the hearts of the people, devouring them." "All right. That sounded like the callous. But how are you still here? Did you manage to fight them off?" The beast crossed his arms and gazed off in the direction of the distant castle, since he had not revealed his name. "My castle has many protections on it, and with those I managed to protect everyone inside. However," he grumbled as he turned around to face Naruto. "The protections have begun to weaken and fail because of the constant strain of darkness bearing down upon it. Soon they will fail completely, leaving the inhabitants at risk. I saw how you fought them off. Your weapon is one of the only things I've seen that works on them effectively, well, besides my own claws." Given that he couldn't help but notice the beast's razor-sharp claws, Naruto could only nod. He stumbled, suddenly tense. If you wouldn't, mind helping me defend the castle?" He said, somewhat bewildered by the request, but also slightly flattered by the compliment. "Sure, why not?" The beast nodded with a determined expression on his face after coughing uncomfortably into his hand. The words, "Thank you," he said. "The castle is this way." "Hey," Naruto said, moving quickly alongside the beast. "What's your name?" Ignoring the blonde with his face buried in the ground, he said, "Just call me Beast," and kept on walking. The castle was even more impressive up close than it was from a distance. The sight of its towering towers and lovely courtyard was breathtaking. Unless the gloomy clouds and gloomy air weren't present. The grand staircase leading to two wings and the doors off on either side of him caught Naruto's attention as they entered the entry hall. When Beast stopped, he looked up, jerking his head in all directions as if he were trying to hear something, and then he let out a deep sigh. "Master!" came a shout of excitement. As Naruto searched for the source, he noticed yet another strange sight. By the sound of the voice, he assumed it was a man, but it wasn't. The clock was primarily brown, with a peach-colored face that was actually his face. Brown eyebrows, close-set green eyes, straight white teeth, and a yellow nose that appeared to be a flat button attached to the clock hands that served as his mustache, were all features he possessed. The hands ended in a heart-shaped point and were both brown. On top of his head was a woodcut pattern that looked vaguely like hair and was curly, brown, and yellow. His body was rectangular, and a glass window on his chest revealed a case with a gold pendulum inside. His arms, or what appeared to be arms, were actually the clock's four short, yellow, curled handles on the sides. He moved two of the legs simultaneously to walk. Overall, he was a peculiar sight. "Cogsworth," the beast replied, "how's the defense around the castle holding?" "Not very well, master," he uttered coldly. "I'm honestly not sure if we can hold out much longer. Those creatures are relentless." "I see," he said, lowering his head. "Is everyone all right for right now though?" "Yes, a bit down, but for the most part everyone is all right." "And Belle?" With regret, Cogsworth remarked. "She's not doing very well. The loss of her father hit her rather harshly, I'm afraid." Saying, "I understand," he turned to face Naruto. "Do you see why I need all the help I can get?" That weapon you have can stop these creatures, or at least hold them off. I know you said you can help, but can you? Naruto took a moment to reflect. This appeared to be precisely what Yen Sid had mentioned. This place would be destroyed if those heartless people discovered the center of the world. Perhaps they would be alright if he could locate the heart and secure it. In Metroville, that must have been the case. As he responded, he glanced at Beast. He asserted, "Of course I can help, and I know just what to do," with assurance. He called forth his KeyBlade and said, "If I can find the heart of this world and lock it away with this, I can stop them forever." "But, if it's okay with you, young sir," Cogsworth added, "where will you start searching for this heart of the world? After all, the world is a huge place." "Well, I figured that this is the only place the Heartless haven't been able to reach, so it must be in the castle somewhere, so that helps," he replied. "But the castle is kind of big, so any help would be appreciated." "Of course," the Beast replied. "The servants here will be willing to help. Cogsworth, go tell everyone else the news." He yelled, "Yes, of course, master," and then took off. But after a few feet, he stopped. What does the heart look like?" "Oh, right," a sheepish Naruto said. "It'll look like a giant keyhole, or a rather small one." "Right," he said slowly as he walked away, repeatedly muttering, "We're doomed," while shaking his head. When Naruto turned to face Beast, he simply shrugged his shoulders. With his KeyBlade in hand, Naruto strolled alone along the east wing. While Cogsworth was busy alerting the other servants in the castle to what they needed to watch out for, Beast had to go check on a few things in another area of the castle. He would need to exercise caution around what are typically inanimate objects if any of the servants were like Cogsworth. The east wing was not very large. In actuality, it was merely a lengthy corridor with a room at the end. In this wing, it was the only spot he could look. He approached the door and put his ear to it. He could hear the faint but recognizable sound of someone crying as he listened. He waited patiently for the door to open after gently knocking on it. When it did, a rather lovely woman wearing an ostentatious yellow ball gown and brown hair pulled up on her head trailed down her neck was standing there. "Yes?" she inquired. "Who are you?" he whispered. "My name is Naruto, Bell. I'm here to help you guys out. I was just wondering if I could ask you a few things." "Oh," she said, dabbing at her eyes, "you're the boy Cogsworth told me about, come on in." In comparison to the other areas of the castle he had seen, Bell's room was rather small. It had a big bed with curtains that hung over it, and it was of a decent size. On the opposite side of the bed was a large, elaborate wardrobe, and on the far side of the room was a large window overlooking the courtyard. Naruto kept his KeyBlade in his hand because he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone in the room. "If you don't mind my asking, why are you so dressed up?" She looked at the dress and said, "Oh, this? We were going to have a bit of a party today, the Beast and I, until." She was upset about what had happened, and he could tell that she might know something. He sat down beside her on the bed and said, "Belle, I know this may be a bit hard to speak about, but I need to know, do you have any idea what brought the darkness here?" She trailed off, her eyes distant. She said. There was a woman, but she was more of a witch than anything. She had green skin and yellow eyes, and she mostly wore black. She had something on her head that looked a lot like horns, and she carried a long staff. The staff had an orb that started to glow, and she summoned those things. She was clearly uncomfortable saying this out loud, but Naruto had to know. He inquired, "Did anything else happen?" "Yes," she uttered falteringly. "Just before she set those things on the town, some kind of portal opened up and a man walked out." "What did he look like?" "Well, I didn't see his face. He wore a spiral mask and a black cloak." At that, Naruto froze. "It isn't possible," she said. Then they looked at me, with a slight hiccup in her voice. They looked right at me before disappearing. And that's when the castle's defenses came up. He said to her empathetically, "Thank you for telling me this, Belle. I know it couldn't be easy. I just have one more question, if you don't mind." "Of course," the woman replied. "The man, did you see his eyes?" Her words were mostly directed at herself. "Well, yes, but eyes can't look like that," she said. "One was red and the other looked like it had rings in them." Naruto muttered an expletive. They heard the explosion at that moment. Belle and Naruto hurried to the west wing of the castle. He reasoned that, at least until they got to the Beast, she would be safer with him. An army of callous invaders entered the castle as a result of the explosion they had heard, which marked the end of the castle's last line of defense. He cut his way through the innumerable heartless that stood in their way. They left the east wing and headed down towards the ballroom, where they heard the beast's roars, giving her the signal that everything was safe. Belle sprinted past him and straight into the ballroom before he could stop her. He saw a terrible scene as he hurried after her. The ballroom was filled with heartless people, the walls were covered in darkness, and the beast was lying on the floor, immobile, and restrained by the heartless people around him. And Belle, lying on a familiar face's shoulders, unconscious. "Toby," Naruto snarled menacingly. "Oh, so you are here," he remarked as if in passing. "And what is that you have there? A KeyBlade? Oh, you are a lucky one." He cried out, "Let her go," coldly. "I don't think I will," he said. "Don't worry, she won't be harmed. At least not right away. We need her for our plans. There are much bigger things going on here than just a simple kidnapping." "We? Yes," said a voice. The woman Belle had previously described emerged from a dark portal a moment later. "There are many of us who have grand plans that involve this girl, and the pure light that her heart contains." "Pure light? What are you talking about?" Toby laughed. "That's more than you need to know," he replied. "Maleficent, the Heartless found the keyhole. This world is about to collapse." "Ah, more good news," she turned to Naruto and said. "My apologies for having to cut this meeting of the minds short, but we really must be off." He rushed at them, shouting, "You're not going anywhere," but missed them as they disappeared into the night, taking Belle with them. "Belle!" was the beast's agonized cries. Naruto looked at him, but he was only able to look away when he saw the expression on his face. Even from here, he could hear the other servants in the castle screaming as the darkness ate into their hearts. It was similar to what had happened to his world, and he was helpless to stop it. He said, "Beast. I'm sorry," and then he was engulfed in a burst of light before vanishing entirely, leaving a world and a broken beast behind as it descended into darkness. As the gummy ship drifted through the vast expanses of the cosmos, Naruto lay on its floor. His eyes were closed, and he was lost in thought. He had reached a single conclusion after reviewing what had happened to the beast's world. There was nothing Beast could have done to save his world, which was doomed before he had even arrived, but that didn't mean he had lost hope of rescuing them. No, he could save the beast's world if he could save his own. However, it was also revealed that Toby was now collaborating with the witch who had taken over the beast's world. This had continued for far too long, and he would have to take action. With a sigh, he got to his feet and sped off to his next location, flaming the gummy ship's engines. This time, where had he landed? It appeared to be the exterior of a stadium of some sort. On either side of the big building were even bigger statues that were posing. He wasn't particularly interested in that, though. A strange group of 3 individuals were approaching the rather large door in front of him. He could make out a duck, a young boy, and an anamorphic dog of some sort. Having seen strangers, he shrugged his shoulders. Hold on, didn't Leon mention a child who was traveling with a duck and a dog? As he followed him inside, Naruto reflected. Perhaps this is the Sora man they mentioned to me. I might go check out this kid's level of toughness. As Naruto walked, he heard what must have been Sora being spoken to by another strange creature. "This here's the world-famous Colosseum, heroes only," it read. "And I got my hands full preparing for the games. So run along pipsqueaks." The look Sora seemed to be giving him made him sigh. "Look, it's like this. Heroes are coming from all over to fight ferocious monsters right here in the Colosseum." The duck answered in a grating tone, crossing his arms. "You've got heroes standing right in front of you." "Yup, he's a real hero," reported the dog. "Chosen by the KeyBlade." "That's what Sora Leon told me about, then, and we're heroes too." The creature exclaimed, "Hero? That runt?" and then burst out laughing. Sora came back with a fiery, "What's so funny? I fought a bunch of monsters, question." He pointed to a big stone beside him and said, "Hey, if you can't even move this, before making an unsuccessful attempt to push it, you can't call yourself a hero." As he lay on the ground, he gasped, "Okay, so it takes more than brawn. Well, let's see what you can do." "Hey," said Naruto. "Sign me up for these games." When he and the others finally became aware of his presence, the creature asked, "Who are you?" "My name's Naruto, and these games sound pretty interesting." The creature said, before sprinting in his direction. He appeared to be looking at him from every side. Naruto simply stood there, staring at the boy Leon had described to him. At first, he didn't notice anything particularly noteworthy. He appeared to be an ordinary child, but he could see something in the children's eyes. If he were telling the truth, he reminded him of himself. The sound of the creature's voice cut through his thoughts. "All right, you seem pretty tough, kid," he responded. "I'll let y'all into the games. Be ready, we start soon." He then proceeded into the next room, which Naruto believed to be the arena. He turned and held out his hand to Sora. "Good luck, kid. Hope to see you in the finals." Sora smiled and gave him a surprisingly firm handshake. "Same to you," he exclaimed, grinning cheekily. As he defeated his final foe, Naruto inhaled deeply. Really, it had only been a bunch of Heartless to remove. It hadn't been that hard. He did take advantage of this chance to work on his magic a little more, but without the KeyBlade this time. It was much more difficult, but he thought it was worthwhile. As he became increasingly inventive with his magic, he used the Heartless as a good target during the first half of the games because he would need all the strength he could muster to deal with Toby when the time came. Balls of fire raining down on the cold-hearted, tornadoes, and more. He wasn't sure how he was coming up with it all, so it actually caught him off guard. Perhaps it was partly because he had always been creative. He turned to see Donald, Goofy, and Sora staring at him with their mouths pressed to the ground. After laughing, he walked past them, wishing Sora and his group luck, and then he sat back to watch them battle. In actuality, they performed admirably. Even though they hadn't been fighting for very long, it was evident that they worked well as a team, though there was obviously much space for improvement. It made him think of the less combative early days of Team 7. He was about to lose himself in his memories when he heard a voice he recognized. "It's good to see you safe, Naruto," the voice said. When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw a person he had never thought he would see again. Kakashi Sensei.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.